you. My name is Jamal Saeed, and I'm very privileged to be running this webinar on the transition from an engineer to manager. And I welcome all of you. It's for those who are returning to attend these webinars, I welcome them back. It's I've been away for a couple of months, and I'm sure you have been away. You have been on vacation or visiting family, so welcome back. To make up the time, I'm just going to go ahead and start with the webinar, and please participate and make sure that you answer some of the questions we're going to throw at you. But this topic is very important, ladies and gentlemen. This is very important. We're looking at, and this is a challenge that it's becoming quite a challenge. How do you transition from being a manager, a technical person, from being an engineer or a technical person to joining the management ranks or the supervisory ranks or even higher management ranks? And I tell you, it's not easy. I do have an engineering background, didn't work much in it, but I understand fully what it means because my background is working for super engineering companies. And you're going to see from my background what I'm talking about. So welcome. I welcome you back. And for those new people who are joining us, I welcome you and I hope to see you on an ongoing basis. So Khader, Bahruddin, Muhammad, welcome all of you. So let's go on and start with our presentation. The topic is transition from engineer to manager. My name is Jamal Saeed. I'm a senior consultant with the company, Meirc Training and Consulting. We are celebrating 60 years next year. So this is something very special for Meirc. And I think it's a great moment for this company, having been around for such a long thing. Apparently, okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the topic. As I said, I don't want to take much of your time. Little bit about background about Meirc. It's founded in 1958, so next year we're celebrating 60 years. We are here in Dubai, and we do, all kind of training on interesting topics from leadership to management, to project management, to HR, to finance, to logistics. So check our website. It's very, very interesting and very exciting. And in addition to that, we have a sister company called Plus Training, where we give specialized industry-specific function-oriented training. And both are led by very capable people. And I hope we see you in these courses. A little bit about the company. Meirc Training, as you can see from our vision, our values stand for mastery, excellence, innovation, reliability, and client centricity. Our vision is to be your trusted partner in developing excellence for generations to come. And as you can see here, our slogan is "For your development is our passion." I will let you read the mission statement. I'm not going to go through it word by word because I know that we need to make up some of the time that we have lost trying to get into this webinar and being in touch with you. Some of the courses that we talk about are the following. So these are the different categories, as you can see here. A very rich portfolio of products, one of the best in the market. So always check it out. Always take care of your development, ladies and gentlemen. Always take care of your development. You are the most important person, and always think of your development because it adds value. The more value you add, the better you feel about yourself, and the company feels great about itself as well. So here we go. Who am I? A very quick background about myself. For those of you who are familiar with me, they know who I am. So I don't want to take much of your time here, but I worked for several companies, and as you can see from my background, I worked for Pepsi, very much manufacturing company, but I was on the IT front, and very interesting challenges, seeing people transitioning from an technical role to a supervisory role, or sometimes to an operational role. Making that transition is definitely quite a challenge, and I'll share with you why. But where I saw it firsthand is when I joined Sun Microsystems and Cisco. And as you know, these two companies, they survive, and their survival is on technical expertise and innovation, and they have fantastic engineers. But sometimes engineers are asked to take on a new responsibility as a manager or a team leader or as a department head, and that's where things don't go very well sometimes. But thank goodness, many engineers are proved themselves to have very interesting caliber when it comes to management and leadership, and many of them who take over at the helm or the top of the company, sometimes they come from an engineering background. With Meirc, I'm living some of my best time in terms of providing knowledge on around specific topics like leadership and management, strategy and planning, sales and marketing, but more importantly as well on negotiations and communication. So this is something very, very exciting for us. Now, let's move on and start what are we talking about here. The objective of this webinar, I would like to talk to you about how do we apply the management function. What is required from you as an engineer or a technical person moving into a management role? What do you require? I like to talk about a little bit about projects, a little bit, not too much, but however, we do cover projects in this course related in the course related to this webinar. We do talk about project management a little bit more. How about KPIs? We like to talk about KPIs as well as communicating. Communication for me and from my perspective, communication is the heart of everything. Okay. And then, of course, how to work with teams and increase the performance of the team. And last but not least, how to manage problems and make decisions. And so these, as you can see already, the agenda is very much full. However, I'd like to share something very exciting with you. And you probably have seen it on our website. We have introduced something called blended learning. And if you attend our courses, once you attend our courses, you have access to online material related to the course that you attend. And I tell you, the material is fantastic. So make sure that when you register for our courses, always ask for the online material as well. And this way, it improves your knowledge of the topic by being in the course itself, as well as following up with some fantastic online material. Now, let's go on. I'm going to ask you the first question. And here comes the first survey. Engineers can never be managers, true or false? So I'm going to show you here your question, and I would love you to participate. So go ahead and start voting. And because I like to know, what do you think? Can engineers make it as managers? We already have 23%. Well done. Well done to all of you who are participating. That's very good. I'm very proud of you guys. And well, some people changed their mind. I'm glad. And that's very good. Well done. So we have 64% participation so far. Maybe some others are just listening in. So let me end the voting, and I'm going to share with you the result. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to share the results with you. So as you can see, all of you answered false, and that's correct. And it can never be true, because we're all human beings and we all have the capabilities to grow to become managers and leaders. And the management and leadership is a skill that you learn. But sometimes it happens that some of the technical people or engineers, when they become managers or they're assigned a management position, unfortunately, they are not coached well, they are not managed well, they are not directed well, and they end up in some very interesting situation, especially when it comes to managing people. Especially when it comes to managing people. Okay? So of course it is false. Engineers, like many of your colleagues, are capable of becoming wonderful leaders and managers. However, here's an interesting statistic, okay? So people with the best technical skills make the best managers, supervisors. How many times you hear this one? But the reality is a little bit, vague. Lots of people with, some of the people with technical background or engineering background, they come with a preset approach toward solving problems, dealing with people, communicating with people. And unfortunately, that doesn't work. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very interesting approach that you need to adapt to in order to become a successful leader as you transition from a technical position. Okay, so like engineering and technical skills, management is to be learned. So that's why we sit down with you and we tell you how you do it. What are the new management techniques that you should be aware of? So as much as you learn the technical skills, leadership and management skills are something that we can work with you on developing. So in this webinar, I'd like to share with you a few of these techniques that you need to develop. All right. So so even though they may have excellent technical skills, okay, there are other skills that as an engineer start requiring: managing people, managing budgets, managing situations, managing team motivation. And motivation is not an easy thing. You have to be aware of these things. Now, here's an interesting statistics which I mentioned at the beginning. Within the first 18 months on the job, up to 40% fail in one way or another. So up to 40% of those technical people or engineers who take on a managerial job, they fail. Now, this is not a good number. And of course, our task is to make sure that this number gets reduced. We would like you to succeed. But the main reason is why they fail is because they can't build relationships. Oh, of course. So you as a manager have to build a relationship, understand the importance of people. So a relationship doesn't mean that you become buddy with them. That's not what we're talking about. The relationship means that how do you make sure that you build that relationship that can provide productivity, success to the organization. And this is very important. And it's a balance that a mature technical person or engineer grows into when he becomes a manager or she becomes a manager or a leader. Okay, so now it's very important that one of the key purposes of a supervisor and manager is to lead. And that's so true. So they are leading a group of people to make sure they achieve certain results. Okay. Now, there are certain mistakes that they have to avoid. And some of the mistakes, unfortunately, are so damaging that you have to be aware of. But most of the mistakes happen is when they don't know how to handle people. And that's why management is a wonderful thing. But it comes with its challenges. Technical skills are also challenging and they are very exciting. But when it comes to management and supervisory skills, you have to know how to deal with people. Okay? Now, I can see from Mubarak and Inas that they're saying that we don't have a voice. I will check with my team if it looks like we have the voice, Mubarak and Inas. And if you don't mind, may I ask that you just check your connection? Maybe that could be an issue on the other side. Okay? Thank you for your patience and thank you for being with us. Now, so one key thing is that the measure of success is not whether you have a tough problem to deal with, but whether it's the same problem you had last year, okay? So if you're having the same problem over and over again, you have to ask yourself, what am I doing wrong? Because supposedly as a manager, you're managing through issues so that you don't come back to them again. Now, if sometimes, of course, if you're managing an employee and this employee moves on, you get the same an employee again. This means that, you know, you may face development issues and what have you. But it's very important that are you able to work yourself out from a situation you're in and put the necessary mechanisms in place so that you don't come back to it again. Okay? That's one of the measures of success that we would like to see in people. Another thing, there's only one thing more painful than learning from experience, and that's not learning from experience. And of course, said by Archibald MacLeish, you know, he is a very, very interesting person when it comes to modern school of poetry and experience and looking at society and looking at these things. So it's very critical that you learn from the experience, and that's another area where we encourage our engineers and the technical people to look at very, very carefully. Now, moving on to the next slide. So the main thing is to keep the main thing in place. And you know what I'm talking about here? I'm talking about priorities. So how do you know the priorities that you're working with on a daily basis? And that's one of the key challenges an engineer or a technical person, when they become managers, how do I prioritize? How do I make sure that I'm working on these priorities? And how do I make sure that my people those priorities? At the end of the day, you have become responsible for the productivity that the company has invested in you. The company would like to see productivity and results. So how do you start translating all of these obligations toward a successful career with the company? So one of the key things here that when we look at management and leadership, one of the key competencies that we like engineers and technical people to develop is to develop an atmosphere where things are running well and willingly. Well and willingly, ladies and gentlemen. This means that you have to have the ability and the motivation. And as you can see here, this ability and motivation, if you have an employee, if you have very high ability and you have a very high motivation, then you are doing very, very well. You see the green area over here. However, if you have very high motivation, but you don't have much ability, so you're supposed to train your people because you want them to become great. However, if you don't have very high motivation and you have ability is very, very low, okay, if your motivation is very low but the ability is relatively high, then you have to know how to encourage them, how to discipline, how to do the certain necessary stuff in order to get them back on track. And of course, if both of them are missing, you as a manager, you have to review your recruitment, you have to do some drastic measures maybe. So as you can see, a situation brings with it some very interesting stuff for the new engineer who's becoming a manager or a technical person who's becoming a manager. Now they have to look at how do I make my organization able, and how to motivate them, because the intention is to make sure things are running well and willingly. 3 theories about motivation and leadership. So in this course, when we talk about the theories of leadership, there are 3 key areas. You have traits area, and then you have behavioral theories, and you have situation theories. When we talk about traits theories, this means that some of the people who came up with the theory say, you know what, certain people are born with leadership skills. And unfortunately, that's not 100% correct. Sometimes it's good that some people, we see them that they have these traits, but sometimes they don't know how to use them. So there you go. Traits theory, sometimes it applies and it doesn't. So we cannot generalize. But sometimes it is, if you have it and you're using it, then that's very good. And then you have the behavior theories, okay, which also depends on how you behave as a leader. The situation depends on the situation you're in, and do you behave as a manager and leader is required to behave. So when we talk about traits, then, the trait is, do you have certain things? Do you know how to build relationships? Do you know how to utilize people's skills? Are you a visionary? All of these things have to do more or less with the traits. But as I said, sometimes people have it, but they don't use it. So there goes a trait. But we, as when we sit down and train people, we tell them that be aware of these traits and start evolving them. On the other side, when we're talking about traits, as you can see this very interesting chart over here, okay, if you have the traits, they control your behavior. This is very critical. They control your behavior, and if they control your behavior, you can influence the processes that you are responsible for. And if you influence the processes, your follower, and you impact the attitude and the behavior of your follower. And of course, this is an ongoing situation, okay? And of course, there are some variables associated with that until the performance outcome is related. So as you can see here from this chart, many things are interlinked. And this is very exciting, that it's not only traits theory, it's many theories working together. When it comes to behavioral leadership, we focus on something what we call leadership management grid. This leadership management grid came from Blake and Robert Blake and Jay Mouton. And basically they talk about this grid where, based on how you interact with people, you have to behave in a certain way. Let me show you this graph. Maybe this will help a little bit more. So as you can see, those who have high concern for production, this one I'm talking about here, those who have very high concern for production, but they don't have much concern for the people, they behave in a way that they are very much task-oriented. They focus on the task and they want to get the task done. You see my point? While those who have very low concern for production and very high concern for people, they behave like, it's a country club situation. Everybody's doing whatever they want. Now, both of them are extremes, of course, but as you can see the behavior behind it, and you probably see some of your managers or people around you behaving that way, and you wonder why they are doing that. And of course, if you have none, then you don't have the management skills to start with, and probably going and attending a course maybe will help, hopefully. And then somewhere in the middle here we have, if you have middle concern for production and middle concern for people, then you behave in a way middle of the road management. And you probably heard, the term of compromise, and that's where management and leaders sometimes compromise. So you, as a technical person, as an engineer, as you grow into this role, and you start adapting this approach, and you compromise a lot, well, good for you. But sometimes compromise can also result in very short-term successes, and when in reality you could be achieving a lot more. This is where we are, ladies and gentlemen. This is where you should be. Your concern for production and your concern for people should be very high, because today, look in your organizations, everything that you do, okay, is depending on teams. And to really work with teams and manage teams and motivate teams, you have to have concern for both. Well, of course, some of you are working on individual tasks and everything, but how many of you are being pulled into teams to work in teams? And this is something we see more and more of, because things are becoming more and more complex and complicated. And in light of complicated situations, you're required to work in teams. So that's why you need to develop these two concerns. Now, when we go, so we talked a little bit about the trait theories, we talked about the behavior theories. Now here comes the situation theory. And the situation theory comes from Hershey-Blanchard. And Hershey-Blanchard, they said, you know what? It's true that you may have traits, and it's true that you may have behavioral situation, behavioral approach, but it is the situation that you need to be aware of. And this is very nice. This is also very nice, because depending on the situation, you apply your leadership skills and management skills. So this is, we really spend on technical people, engineer, on letting them understand how important it is that they understand the situation. The better you understand the situation, the more mature a person is. So that is why when you have, for example, somebody who is not very mature, and but they are new in the organization, you probably have to direct them, tell them what they need to do. But if somebody is very enthusiastic, and they like to participate in everything, and yes, they are relatively new, maybe you want to coach them a little bit. However, if somebody is a mature person, their skill set is very good, but they are pretty much down, and they have been with the company for some time, and they feel demotivated, you have to support them. In reality, when the thing that we work with companies on, people like you, is whenever you reach a stage where very little direction and very little support, this means that you have a very good team. Why? Because you're delegating to them. So imagine yourself, think of yourself pretty much. Have you been delegated a task recently? If you have been delegated tasks recently, don't get upset, because that's a good sign that you are a mature person and you're knowing to, you are able to take on more and more responsibilities. And as you take on more and more responsibilities, you are able to progress within the organization or within your team responsibilities or your team responsibilities. So this is what we call situation leadership. Depending on the situation, especially that of the employee that you are dealing with, you apply certain managerial skills. Okay, so we covered very lightly, and of course, this in the course we covered in much more detail. 3 types of leadership and management skills that we ask the technical people as well as engineers to take on board. Now, so situation leadership is something that you do to people, but something it's not something you do to people, but something you do with people, and this is something very important to keep in mind. Now, moving on. As we know, there's no single all-purpose leadership style. So you can see from traits to behavior to situation, you have to develop that agility in order to understand that this depends. I behave in a certain way, and I approach things in a certain way, and that's very critical. All right. Moving on. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay. So based on the situation leadership, you must analyze it and ask yourself, okay, what do I need to do to make sure that I move on and apply the right leadership skills? So with the topic of leadership and management covered, to some extent, of course, let's talk a little bit about planning and organizing and why this is important for you as a technical person, as an engineer who is progressing toward a managerial role. All right. But before I do that, I like to throw a question at you. Here we go. Planning is one of the key activities of management. Please let me know what you think. Very good participation. Well done. We are at 22% and growing. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Very good. We have the surge now. And Bahruddin Ahmad is saying, yes, that's correct. Mayada is also saying, yes. Well done, Mayada. Okay. Well, I said, well done, Mayada, and somebody changed their mind. That's very good. So let me share with you some of the input. We are standing at 40. Oh, so we have also some additional people participating again right now. We're standing at this. I'm going to just stop the vote a little bit because I said out of time management here, because I want to make sure I finish the slides and give you a chance to ask questions if you need to. Okay, so here we go. Oh, thank you. Thank you for your participation. So I'm going to end the vote now and I'm going to share with you the results. So here we go. So to all of you who answered yes, well done. Planning, ladies and gentlemen, is one of the key activities of management. That's where it all starts. That's where you put goals and objectives. That's where you get things going. That's where you start scheduling, because you cannot do any of those things unless you plan. So when you assume a new position as a manager, coming from a technical background and engineering background, they're going to ask you to plan your department work, plan your employees' work, plan your task work, and that's not easy. But if you get, through the right skills, or you develop the right skills for planning, it becomes relatively easy. So when we talk about work types, we are talking about two types of work: one-off jobs and routine jobs. One-off jobs, basically, you do a big job once every year or something like that. But you also have lots of routine jobs, operational jobs that you do it on every day. And as you can see, if you look at your schedule, you are doing lots of these things on a regular basis. Maybe you'll get a one-off job like a project, you do it and you get it done. And then you have the routine jobs where you are doing something on a regular basis, visiting customers, calling customers. If you are into maintaining computers, you have to maintain computers on a regular basis, and so on and so forth. So this is something that you have to understand. One of the key responsibilities of a manager, an engineer who becomes a manager, is how do I keep my team productive. This means that certain tasks, all major tasks can be treated as standalone projects, which represents in many situations the majority of our tasks. So many of them can be treated as standalone, but many of them also are more than a task. It's more of a routine that you take on board. So what is a project in many ways? Okay. A project usually starts with a work order. Say, the customer will call you and say, listen, we would like you to build a house, we would like you to build a network, we would like you to maintain something for us. So it becomes more or less a project, okay? So it's a specific task or a series of tasks, which when completed, you achieve the desired result, okay? And the project occurs when you have a goal or plan achieving that goal. So it's very important to understand a little bit about the background of a project, how to plan it, how to manage it, and how to monitor it and review it. Now, the work order or a project has to be very specific because there are legal obligations, financial obligations, and you want to make sure that things are done the right way. It should not be very, very complex, and the more complex, try to make sure that you bring it down to a level of simplicity. So try to simplify the task so that everybody knows what they're doing, what's going on. It has to be measurable and verifiable. That's definitely a must. And it has to be consistent with what you have in terms of resources. And that's where the beauty comes in when it comes to when you take on the role of a manager, you have to do all of these things. What does it mean? You have to assign objectives to your people. You have to explain things to your people. You have to give them KPIs that will help them measure their success. You have to verify and follow up and control their behavior and approach to things so that they are successful and achieve their goals. And you have to use them the right way. You cannot give somebody more weight than other people just because due to lack of scheduling. You as a manager, you have to ensure the productivity and the results are achieved. All right. Similar to the story over here. And as you can see, many times what happens when objectives are not defined very well, there are always issues. And of course, if there are no management and management are poor or management is poor, you know what happens. Blaming starts flying all over the place. So elements of management are the following. It's very important that you plan. What am I doing? Scheduling. When do I want to do it? implementing, leading, making sure that you lead the people, you lead the staff and the contractors who are working with you. Control them, make sure that you have the right KPIs, and of course reporting and giving them feedback. So this is very important because sometimes based on the feedback you're going to make some interesting decisions. So when we do look at these things from this particular point, we try to break down things. So when you get a work order, you try to break it down. And in the language of project management, the work breakdown structure, or what we call as WBS, you start working things into a task level where you can assign to somebody. And this is very important. And the bigger the task, this means that you have grown with the company, and this means that you are taking more responsibility. But remember, sometimes people are new in the company, so you take a small task, and that's where you're taking part of the WBS in order to help achieve the project. At the same time, how do we apply this WBS? You can apply it anywhere, whether you are in the planning, whether you are in control, and then, of course, that is followed by feedback and how to improve things around you. When we plan, good productivity measures can be used in the analysis and development plan. Okay, so this means that when you're planning, some of these activities that we talked about can be used to produce the desired measures. Controlling, how you monitor things. Feedback, how you make sure that your people understand how they are performing. And improvement, what things they have to do in order to improve their task performance at the end of the day. So, all maintenance resources are constrained to some degree, and the following constraints are common. So if you are maintaining, if you are doing any kind of a task and you're trying to schedule people, because remember, when you plan something is one thing, and then when it comes to scheduling is basically putting time against the task, okay? You all of a sudden, your manager will say, you don't have enough people. Sorry, I have to pull this engineer from this location to another. We don't have a budget. We don't have enough space. And as you can see already, in light of these constraints, your responsibilities are challenged. So it's very important you know how to work with constraints, because one of the key responsibilities of managers that I cannot give you everything, but you still have to deliver the job. So you have to be creative around things. You have to make sure that you have strong relationships. You know how to motivate people, because this kind of constraints are going to happen. Let me ask you now the third survey question. Let me see if you will know this one. Here we go. Time management skills are critical for an engineer transitioning to a managerial role. What do you think? Very good. Appreciate your participation here. Excellent. Excellent. Very good. Well done. All right. Give everybody 5 more seconds before I end the voting and share the results. Okay, so here we go. So this is what we answered. All of you answered correct, and that's very true. I'm proud of you. The fact is that as an engineer or a technical person moving into a managerial role, time management becomes even more important. You might be very good at time management, but time management at a different level, at the managerial level, means that whatever you do with respect to time is not only impacting you as a person, it's impacting everybody around you. Why? Because you're managing resources. So it's very important you always remember that. Now, sometimes when we have a task, and remember when we talked about WBS or work breakdown structure, sometimes the task takes this shape. Okay, and from a project management perspective, you may not use it, but I like you to be aware of it. Okay, always be aware of these elements around a particular task. For example, when is the earliest I can start a task? What's the duration of the task? How long is it going to take me? What's the earliest I can finish this task? And then some other questions, for example, what's the latest I can start? How much time do I have in between so that I can play with? And then, of course, what's the latest I can finish? So when you have an activity, assigning an activity to a person, it's important that they know, when they finish and when they start, and how much duration do they have. Sometimes people leave and start doing their tasks, and they don't know when they are supposed to deliver it. So communicate very well the activities and the time constraints related to every task that they have. Now, this will lead us to the following. This means that when you are doing some resource planning and you are putting these activities together, you have to understand the effort that every person has to put into the task, the working time, okay, the time value per time. Are they working 8 hours a week? Are they working per day? So this is very important, how to calculate the effort that's taking place. How many people do you need? And of course, the productivity index, which is the rate at which the work will be produced. And this is a very interesting percentage that you need to keep in mind when you take on this additional role of becoming a manager or a supervisor. So resource scheduling and leveling is very important. And what do I mean by leveling? Resource leveling is that you have to make sure that peaks in work don't happen too often, because if you have too many peaks, this means that you are putting all the resources together at the same time. So be very careful with that. As much as possible, always make sure that resource leveling is taking place to minimize the period by period variation in resource loading. You don't want to load your team too much, remember. So what does this mean? When you are measuring the performance of your team, we encourage you to develop something around performance management. So it is looking at your dashboard of the car. How fast is the car going? Do I have enough gas? Is the car warming up? The same thing with your people. So if you schedule things right, if you manage things well, as an engineer or technical person becoming a manager, you have to manage the performance. Measuring the performance will give you productivity. Productivity will give you results. So it's very important to see how my people are performing, okay? And if you cannot manage it, ladies and gentlemen, you cannot measure it. So you have to understand this dashboard in many ways. So here comes the next question, okay? I'm going to ask you the following question. Understanding the importance of strategic alignment between job objectives and company goals is critical for any engineer who would like to succeed as a manager. Let me see. Understanding the importance of strategic alignment between job objectives and company goals is critical for any engineers who would like to succeed as a manager. Very good. Okay. Thank you for your participation. I see 12 consistent answers from my colleagues online, and I really appreciate that. We have a bit of a surge there. Somebody said false. Well, let's end the voting and share this with you over here. Okay, so this is the results. Well, you know what? When you become a manager, it's very important that you understand, how your role is as a manager, how you can help the company align things. Alignment between your job and the company goals, alignment between the job of your people and your job and the company goals is extremely, extremely important. So it's very important that strategic alignment exists. But how do we achieve it? Tony Robbins, mentioned in one of his quotes, setting goals is the first step in turning the invisible into the visible. And that's so true. So basically, as a manager, if you have a few people or a team that you are running or managing, it's very important you put those goals in place. These goals or objectives have to support the company, okay? Because if you do that, you are making sure that you are successful, as well as your manager is successful, as well as your director is successful, as well as the company is successful. You have to do the same thing with your people as well. You want to make sure that they are aligned with you. So alignment is very important. So setting goals is very important, but it is important as well to make the goals smart. And it is important you put an action plan to achieve these goals. And it's very important that you stick with it. That stickiness, we talked about it before, is where you monitor and control the people that you have. But what's the difference between a goal and an objective? A goal is something more abstract in nature, or it's not a more generic sentence. You don't have full measures behind it. But when we talk about goals, it becomes a statement that has to be smart. And when we talk about smart, this means that it has to be specific. What exactly you want me to do? Measurable. How are you going to measure my success? Attainable. Is it something realistic that I can do? Relevant. Does it support my company, or does it support my job and I can support the company? And time bound means that when do you expect it from me? And as you can see, this is critical. And that's where many technical people or engineers, when they take on that responsibility, they kind of miss the communication of objectives in this fashion. And all of a sudden, you know, responsibilities are not very clear, issues arise, and this is where, you know, the 40% we talked about at the beginning starts taking shape. So um, some of the smart objectives, and just going to take you back to that particular slide one more time. You see the measure over here. Look at the M over here. That M, ladies and gentlemen, is what we call the KPI. Okay, KPI. This means that the key performance indicator. So what does it mean? A key performance indicator is an important part of the SMART objective. It's an indicator or a gauge that measure and give you information about what's going on. It tells you about the performance and if the result or activity is looking okay and this is supporting the strategic goal. And it's key because it's measuring something important. It's pinpointing something that you know is critical for you to succeed. Okay? So basically with KPIs, tells you what's happening. Why did it happen this way? Should we continue like this, or do I need to put an action plan in order to fix it? This particular topic happens in all across the company functions. If you are working in finance, you will have your own KPIs. If you're working in productivity, you're going to have the same thing. If you are working in HR, the same thing. Safety, sales, quality, miscellaneous, customer service, you name it, you got it. Every one of these functions has its own KPI. So it's very critical you become familiar in developing KPIs or running your job and the job of the people working for you based on SMART objectives supported by, you know, important and relevant KPIs. At the end of the day, without yardstick, there is no measurement, and without measurement, there is no control. Let's move on now. Dealing with others, dealing with team members, and you know, I'm coming very close to the end of the hour, so I'm going to make sure that I will cover these slides. So here comes my question to you, okay? Written communication is the best method for reaching out, okay? So here we go. Is it this one? It's this one over here, yeah. Written communication is the best method for reaching out. Please help me answer the following question. Let me see if you you know, can help me with that one. We have an uptick. We have a split. Very interesting. We have some people saying, yes, it is true. And some people saying, no, it is not. Yes, very good. I wasn't expecting this, but let's see. Let's see. Maybe I learned something this time around. Very good. So we have reached almost our limit of 11 participants, and we have some people coming in right now. There you go. So thank you very much. Let me share with you the vote that we have. Look at this one. It's like almost 50-50. Man, well, thank you for your participation, but written communication is important, but there's nothing better than face-to-face because it is easy for let me see. It is easy for people and managers to communicate from afar by email, via memos, but that doesn't motivate much. If you want to motivate, it's very important that you talk to people. Let them see your face. Let them see your body language. Let them see your smile. And sometimes if you're kind of, you know, assertive, let them see that you are serious about the matter. Now, Nasreen is saying, yes, it's important to communicate written because this way you keep record of everything. Well, in some situation, written communication is important, but written communication does not get the results the way that face-to-face communication does it. I tell you, it's the best thing ever. So what we do today, and as you can see, I have lots of young people with me today. You communicate via text, you communicate via WhatsApp, via Facebook. I totally agree with these things. And of course, in the company, you communicate via email. But I encourage you to get off your chair and go to your friend and to your manager or to your people and talk to them. And it's very important they see you and they see the expressions on your face and let them understand how important it is to have that kind of communication. And communicating, okay, is not only written. Written is a very small part of the communication. In addition to written communication, you have physical communication, body language communication, all of the communication that make up the spectrum of communication. Now, so Communication is the passing of a thought, of an idea from a sender to receiver. This means that it's what we do and give to get understanding. So you have to do something and give something and get understanding. Is this something important? Did you get me? So how does the communication process operate? There's a very important part about the sender and the messenger, as you can see. The sender is sending a message and the receiver is sending a feedback. I understood you. However, or I did not. That is very much what we call perception. Sometimes the perception is verbal, sometimes it's visual, but notice here what's happening. All of these filters here in the background of these two individuals are also happening. The attitude, the culture, the education, the experience, the gender, all of these things stand in the way of a proper communication. So that's why sometimes we always encourage people to take on the face-to-face. I know that today we have shifted away from face-to-face in light of the technology and everything, but it's irreplaceable to have a face-to-face communication. And I encourage you to do more of it, okay? So remember this transition or this particular process over here. The sender is something message. The message is important, but the package is also important. How are you sending this message is very important, ladies and gentlemen. The package. Are you sending it just via email, or are you talking to people? Are you presenting something? Always make sure that the package is very good. The message is a small part, the package is also very important. And as you can see here, communication comes in different types. The written one, the verbal one, and the non-verbal one. The written one is very important, but these two are also very important. Verbal, people hear your tone, the tone of voice, and non-verbal, people see your body language. These two normally form a very high percentage of the communication mechanism. So, why people don't communicate well? Well, they have emotional blocks. We know that. And that's where we encourage technical people, engineers, to become mature, understand that not everybody is the same like them. Sometimes they have to become also emotionally aware of their emotions and how can emotions stop them from talking to others. Sometimes we come with our own prejudices. Sometimes we come with our own biases. Sometimes we come from a different culture than other cultures. If I'm talking to a Japanese person, probably the other person does not show me any reaction because that's their culture. And while if I come from the Middle East, I'm using my hands, I'm using my face, I'm using my expressions. And as you can see, you have to be aware of these things. But most importantly, be aware of yourself. Okay? So it is very important, okay, to leverage your personality effectively and be aware of your emotional blocks. Now, so what defines a good communication? What does it look like? Well, verbal communication is not over when you finish delivering your message. And you have to remember that. It's that you communicate, but what happens after? Do you follow up? Do you make sure that they understand it? Sometimes we give commands or we give orders and we don't even ask for a feedback from an individual. So you as a technical person or an engineer, when you start taking responsibility as a manager, it's very critical that people understand you. So you may follow a question saying, listen, I want you to do this. Do you understand me? They shake their head, yes, I understand. So can you repeat what I said? And this is very important. As you can see, this is communication. And the more they understand, the better the job gets done. Okay? So nonetheless, always be aware of body language. It's a very important part of the formula of communication. As a matter of fact, it leaves quite an impression and it can make quite a difference. If you are very good with body language, you can leave quite a strong impression. Okay? At the end of the day, sometimes how we communicate can lead into conflicts. And this is something we cannot run away from. At the beginning of the presentation, when I was talking about leadership styles and management styles, I talked about a particular behavioral style where you have to work as teams. And I tell you, in teams, conflicts are going to happen. Why? Because we're humans. I think differently than you do. I do different things differently than you do. I have different perceptions than you do. And I have different interests in what you do. So of course, everybody has their own way of thinking. And this is where, as an engineer and as a technical person pursuing a managerial job, you have to be aware of all of these things. And the better you handle these things, the better you become. But can conflicts be good? Well, according to studies, conflict can be good sometimes. And if you manage the conflict very well over here, you can have a very high performing team, believe it or not. So if you have a very high performing team, despite the conflicts, that's not bad. And that's what happens in companies where they are very creative. People will argue, but I tell you, they come up with some of the best ideas. So you have to manage conflicts and you have to be aware of them, okay? And the way that you manage conflicts, it's very important that you develop the right habits around managing the conflict. Don't try to assume things right away. Always try to be a very good listener. In conflicts or anything that you do, listening is an important skill that I encourage you to develop. Now, here comes Thomas Kilmann conflict mode instrument. In this particular instrument, Thomas Kilmann said, you know what? Based on the level of assertiveness and cooperation, you can develop different styles of conflict management. And this is where I ask you, depending on the situation, make sure that you are managing the right or applying the right conflict management skill. For example, if you would like to, something requires lots of cooperation, so you have to be accommodating. If something requires that you don't cooperate and you're not being assertive, then try to avoid the situation. If something requires somewhere in between, then you have to compromise. If something requires that you have to be assertive, then you're going to be competing. If something requires that you have to be assertive and cooperative at the same time, maybe teamwork has to happen. Now, problem solving and decision making. You're going to be making more decisions than ever before, and you're going to be trying to solve problems because now you're dealing with people. And people come with their problems from different angles and different backgrounds. Okay? So here comes my last question to you. You do not need to define a problem, just jump in and start fixing. Let's see how you're going to answer this one. Well done. Very good. Very good. I'll give everybody a chance to finish with their feedback. Excellent. All right. So I think we're reaching our limit almost there. Allow me to end the voting. Thank you. Thank you very much. Last push. Here we go. I would like to share the information with you. As you can see, the majority of you said false, and I have to agree with you. Never ever jump into a situation or a problem without defining it first. Do you know that defining the problem is 50% of solving the problem? If you know what the problem is, you are 50% there, and that's very exciting. I'm going to share with you in the next few slides a couple of things. One, how to solve problem. You have the helicopter view. What do I mean by that? When we talk about helicopter view, basically, try to take a step back or rise above the situation and try to analyze the overall situation. This will help you identify the problem from a different angle and would also help you prioritize the issues that are causing the problem. And at the same time, you can also analyze the possible causes and, of course, decide this is the most important cause that I need to focus on. So that's what we call the helicopter view, basically taking a ride in a helicopter and rising above. The other approach that we always encourage in our courses is Kepner-Trigo. And I'd like you to do some reading on this one. And if you'd like to attend our courses, that would be even better. But this is a very important approach where basically you try to understand the information behind the problem, and then you do a problem analysis, you do a decision analysis, and potential problem analysis. What does it mean? You analyze the problem, understand what is going on here. And then you have to decide what are the alternatives that I have to do here. So you're going to make some decisions around alternatives. Based on the decision that you make, because remember, you have come up with some alternatives over here, you make a decision to pursue it, but at the same time, has my decision given me the best results? That's the potential problem analysis, that based on my decision, am I receiving, is the problem better? Have I created more issues here? And this is why Kepner-Trigo is very powerful. Why? Because that's how executives think. And this is how you solve problem on the long run, okay? But sometimes you need some tools. For example, when we want to understand the cause analysis, this is one of the best tools available in the market, and it never gets old. We call it the Ishikawa or the fishbone approach, where based on a fishbone approach, you look at the problem over here. You see the head of the fish, and then you start looking at the major causes behind the fish or behind the problem, and based on that one, you start digging into the sub-causes of the major causes. And accordingly, you start deciding if this is the cause over here, or this is the cause, or this is the cause, and you start coming up with a solution behind these causes. So this is what we call the Ishikawa diagram. Very, very powerful situation. As I wrap up my presentation today, all I would like you to remember is that as a manager, you're going to find yourself dealing with lots of problems. And in light of the problems, you're going to be making lots of decisions. And by the way, I'm going to give you a hint. It's decisions that make you a good manager or a bad manager. Seriously now, come to think of it. That's decisions that you make is what makes you a good manager or a bad manager. So if you think about it, everything that you do, everything that you apply, the situations you manage, the way that you think, the way that you approach things, the way you manage people, the way you motivate them, will end up with a decision that you have to make. So I ask you to always make the right decision. So I leave you with a small question that you need to ask yourself. So which way you want to go? Will you go into the proper approach of management, or will you go to a confused type of management, which we don't call management at all? This is decisions I want you to take, and make sure that you always remember decisions is what make you, and only capable managers can do the right decisions. So I want to wish you all the best. I want to thank you for your time and for being with us today. I'd like to leave you with some reading material so that you enjoy them in case you want to buy some books around the topic. First of all, The Leadership Challenge is a very nice book about management and leadership and transitioning into this role of management and leadership from a technical background. The second one is The 5 Levels of Leadership by John C. Maxwell. Very nice book, one of the best written in the market. Transforming Performance Measurement. This is around the KPIs of the organization. Very important as well. A little bit of project management for you. So this way you understand, because you're going to be involved in projects. So this is very important for you. Last but not least is the Decision Making. This is very good. As you can see, Decision Making and Solving Strategies. This is a very good book. And The Workplace Drama. Train your team to have no complaints. How you get your team to work in a very good way. I want to wish you all the best. And if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to spend a couple of minutes waiting for your questions. Otherwise, I look forward to having you again in the next couple of weeks. I will be running another webinar, and I hope that I see you joining us then. Thank you, Baptiste. Thank you, Abu Bakr. Ahmed, thank you. Thank you for being with us, sir. All right. Okay, thank you, everybody. I will go ahead and start ending the event. I wish you all the best and have a wonderful, wonderful weekend, and enjoy your rest.
Meirc.com